Hey there guys, it's me, Corinna Bench from mydigitalfarmer.com and from sharedlegacyfarms.com. Hope you're doing well today. Today's video tutorial, I am going to be talking about emails, specifically how to write better emails. I'm going to share with you my top tips for writing better copy when you're writing emails. Now, the stuff I'm going to share with you today, you can also use when you're putting together sales pages, website copy, and things like that. But I'm going to be really focusing a lot on specifically on how to write emails that are engaging, that your people are going to want to open. I used to hate writing emails, and I know for a fact that many of you are in the same place that I used to be. You're probably running through things in your head like, what do I even write about? Do you ever sit down in front of a computer and just stare at an empty screen and say, okay, people tell me I should write emails on a regular basis, but I don't know what I would even say. Or maybe you hate getting emails. Do you ever open up your inbox and you just see, 20, 30, 40 a day, depending on how big of a farm you are, and it's just a chore to go through them. And then all of the emails that just feel like junk that you just don't ever even open up. And in the back of your mind, when I tell you should be writing emails, you're thinking, I don't want to be one of those farms or one of those businesses for someone else where they see it and they're like, oh, not again, right? Or maybe you're worried about looking too salesy. I know my husband was really hung up on that when we first started talking about doing more email marketing. Also, it took forever to write an email long ago before I really knew what I was doing. And I just felt like it was a waste of my time, or I just wanted to be more efficient. I wanted to get faster at it and feel like, you know what, someone's actually going to open this, so it's worth my time. And then even the promotions tab phobia, right? Like a lot of us sit there and say, well, I don't want to learn how to write emails, or I don't need to write more emails because so many of them are probably going into the promotions tab. Maybe that's happening to you. I know that when I had a different email service provider, I worried a lot about that. I use ConvertKit now, and that's kind of one of their claims to fame, that things don't go into the promotions tab as often. So it's not a perfect system, but it's certainly a lot better than things like MailChimp, for instance, which is one of the reasons I am an affiliate for ConvertKit. Or even you're just worried about sending too many emails. So there's this fear that I had when I was first starting out, well, how many emails do I write, and will I create email fatigue? And are people going to say, not another one, to the point where they're going to, unsubscribe, which is the ultimate fear we all have, right? That we go work so hard to get this email lead or someone on our list, and then we send them emails that are so bad or so boring or too many that they just unsubscribe altogether and we've lost them, right? And then I just mentioned it, but what if my emails are boring? That was a huge fear that I had. I don't want to be one of those people are like, oh, and they don't even want to open them from the beginning. So, how we write emails, if we choose to say, this is something that I'm going to do and I'm going to do it well, how we write our emails does matter, because you're right, we're training people whether to decide whether they're going to open this email or not based on how helpful our content is. If our people consistently open up our emails and they don't get any value from them, or they find them boring, or they're always salesy, or whatever the reason might be, they will not open it up as often every time you send another one. So on the flip side though, if you learn how to write email copy well, and people are like, 50% of the time that stuff that he or she writes is really good and I get something out of it, I might open it up. So if you learn how to write good copy, if you learn these kind of tricks of the trade for how to write good emails, the flip side can be true. People will actually want to open your emails. They will look forward to getting your emails. So I want you, if you're watching me live, or even if you're watching later on in the replay, I want you to share in the comments, if you feel like it, what's the one thing or the two things that are holding you back from sending emails? What are those fears? I just went through a bunch of them. Maybe some of those are yours. And just write those down, because I'm curious to see if you have some of those same fears that I had, and that to some degree I still have. Those things still run through my head. So this is one of the reasons why I decided to purchase a copywriting course, because I wanted to learn how to get better at this. I wanted to get over this fear. I wanted to learn some of the tricks of the trade so that I could write good copy. Here's the thing. there are people who write me emails, because I'm subscribed to a lot of emails since I'm trying to learn a lot of stuff in the digital marketing space. There are some emails that I look forward to getting. Okay, now I have a ton of things that come into my inbox that I just click and delete. Probably like you too, I don't never even open them. But there are some that I always open. And I know that that's the case for you too, that you have a few people that write you and you always open those. So what is it about those emails that makes you want to open them? Okay. Now maybe it's, oh, well, it's from a personal friend. So I know that it's going to be handwritten to me, a unique note written to nobody else, and it's going to feel that way. Okay, well, think about that as you're a copywriter, right? Maybe that's how you need to write your emails so that it feels like it's unique to that person. Or maybe you open some of those emails because the headline is written in such a way for you to realize this is something I should open. It's got value. It's got information that I need to know. For instance, we're having a Thanksgiving share pickup on the weekend, and so I was sending out details about that. So I didn't try to get fancy with my headline. I wrote very specifically, Thanksgiving share pickup details, because I know that there are some people who are going to open that because, dang it, they just want the information inside. They don't need me to be all fancy schmancy and fun with my words. And so I wrote that as a very basic informational kind of email. So just be thinking about those emails that you get right now that you actually enjoy opening. I want you to kind of analyze, why do you open those consistently? And then as I go through these tips that I'm going to share with you right now, be thinking about, are some of these tips at play in how those kinds of emails are written? All right. Now, I actually, believe it or not, get emails from customers, from farmers like you. Actually, there's a few of you who have written to me about this. I have people who write to me on a fairly consistent basis and tell me that they really like getting my emails. And I save those in a special file, because when I first started getting them, I was like, I can't believe that I'm getting these kinds of emails. People are actually telling me, thank you for emailing me. Because when I first started writing all these sales emails and these value-laden email sequences that weren't really pitching anything, but just teaching stuff, I was like, man, what am I doing? Like, is this working? Are people going to be sick of getting all this stuff? And but I wrote them anyway, and now I have people who are saying, I love getting your emails because I have learned so much. Okay, so it is possible. I guess I'm sharing that because it is possible to actually create content through email marketing that makes people excited about your brand, that makes people creates goodwill. So I'm going to walk you through what some of my kind of tips are that I've learned through my copywriting courses, but also through lots of experience. I've written a lot of emails in my time. I should have looked up that statistic. ConvertKit actually tells me how many emails I have sent in my lifetime so far, and it is a lot. Maybe I'll look it up and put it in the comments later. All right, so here we go. I'm going to start sharing my tips with you right now for how to write better email copy. Not in any particular order, but I just kind of made a list of some of my top tips. All right, the first thing is I want to say that I always start by writing my call to action first. Always. When I sit down to write an email, whether it's, hey, I'm going to put a whole bunch of emails together in a sales email sequence, and I have to write like 10 of them. Each time I sit down to write one of those, or maybe it's just my weekly broadcast, I write down what is it that I want them to do. And that's the first thing that I write, and there's usually some kind of a click involved, so I'll add the link to it. You always want them to click something. You want them to either, click to download this free PDF that I made for you, or this cheat sheet. Maybe it's click to watch this video that I put together for you, or click to watch the link on my Facebook page video that I put together last week, or go buy now. Maybe it's actually a sales pitch, like buy this now, or go to the online store and place your order for next week. Maybe it's share a testimonial, or write me back and tell me something I need to know. Whatever that call to action is, write that down. So you should be very clear before you even start writing, what is it that this whole email is designed to do? And then you kind of reverse engineer how to get there, right? It's like what needs to happen as I write to kind of baby step them to this process so they're ready to click that link. Now, why do we want them to always be clicking a link? This was a really kind of revelational concept to me when I first heard this, and it totally works. We are training people to click. Okay, I know that sounds weird, but if you only ever offer opportunities to click when you want them to buy something, they're not going to click. The likelihood that they will actually click on that link is not as high as if you have been writing emails every single week. in your regular relational emails, and there's always something that they click on, whether it's, download a freebie or learn this. It's almost like they've learned every time I click, I get something valuable. There's something that comes back to me. And that's sort of a psychological thing that begins to build up in their minds, so that when it is time for you to actually go for a click that's going to lead to a sale, it's easier for them to click because they have always clicked. There's a habit that they click in your emails, okay? So that's one of the reasons why we always want to have something that we ask them to do inside of your email. So begin with the end in mind. What is your strategy, especially when you're writing those long email sequences where you're putting several emails back to back over the course of 14 days that are like a drip campaign? You need to know, what is it that I want them to do at the end, all right? And then just as a sidebar, when I do write those like 10 email series, my first few emails are not, the call to action in those is not buy now. It is not go to my store and buy my CSA. Those are usually like, hey, here, download this freebie to see an example of the garlic ebook that you're going to get when you join my CSA, or here, download this sample newsletter so that you can see what you would get every week, or here, download this sample illustrated box guide to show you a resource that you're going to get to help you learn how to eat the food, or here, watch this video training that's inside of my academy, right? So like I'm training the click through that process, so that every time there's something for them to do that gets them more interested. And then finally, the last few emails in those series is the click is always buy now, buy now, buy now. Or when the cart is actually open, I'm like, buy now, buy now. That's always in there too. But just kind of keep that in mind. It's not always buy now. It shouldn't always be buy now. Okay, that's tip number 1. Always write your call to action first. Number 2, write like you talk. Oh, this should be tip number 1. Write like you talk. Conversational emails. And if you are on my email list right now, which you can get onto if you want to go to sharedlegacyfarms.com/email download, not only will you get a download of my email campaign that I gave to my CSA members, Early Bird, a couple of years ago as a swipe file, but you'll also get subscribed to my list. And then you can start watching how I write to you every week, because I do send a list to my email farmers every week, and you can see how I practice this. Write like you talk. This is so huge. So many people feel like they need to get business talk and talk professionally. No, people will read your emails if it sounds like a conversation that you're actually having over coffee. And the reality is, we do not talk like a perfect grammatical sentence a lot of times. We begin sentences with prepositions and with fragments. And sometimes we say things like, yep, and we don't have a subject in the sentence. Okay, and that's endearing, and that feels like you're actually talking to a real person when you're reading that kind of an email. So really think colloquially, think conversation, and sometimes it's even helpful to record your voice. I used to do that at the very beginning. I would record myself on my app that I have on my phone called Rev, and I would just talk out what I wanted to say, and then I would type it out. All right, so write like you're talking to a friend, not a professor. I feel like that alone will get you some serious mileage in terms of higher open rates. Number 3 kind of goes along with this. Don't be afraid to use bad grammar. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of feedback from this. You guys are going to write comments and say, I totally disagree. I think people buy based on how, I need to look educated. Listen, when I say write bad grammar, I'm not saying let's all start talking like we're farm hicks, okay? But what I mean by that is it's kind of like going along with writing conversationally. You don't have to write a perfect sentence with a subject and a verb and a direct object and indirect object or whatever with a period. Okay, sometimes I purposely just write, one word. It might just be amen, and then it's carriage return, next line, right? Or sometimes it's missing a subject. It'll just be a phrase, or it might not even have all capitals in it. Or I don't have the perfect punctuation, and I do that especially in like the subject lines. A lot of times I don't always punctuate everything, because I feel like when I write personal emails to my friends, I don't always capitalize. Like when I'm texting, I'm not always capitalizing anymore. And so when you see like a subject line, for instance, that doesn't have, when it's just all in lowercase, it just feels different. Like you see that and you're like, oh, it's almost like they're writing to me as a friend. Okay, and it's effective. I feel like people will click it because it doesn't feel stuffy. So I don't want you to get angry and mad at me when I say this, okay? I'm not saying jump off the deep end and start talking like a crazy person, but you don't have to use perfect grammar. You don't have to write an essay like you would for your 8th grade English teacher. We are not following all the rules of English anymore, okay? We are writing like we talk, and frankly, sometimes we don't talk perfect English, okay? So 1-word sentences, 1-sentence paragraphs. Your English teacher would freak out if you don't have a topical sentence and a concluding sentence and 3 sentences in the middle that push the point home. That's not how we're writing here, okay? We are not writing essays for English class. We are writing persuasive sales copy. And that is a totally different ballgame, totally different rules. You got to get that in your head. And if you don't want to embrace that, I guess we're done, okay? So I'm not going to go any more there. I just really feel passionate about this. Write like you talk, and don't be afraid to write with imperfect grammar from time to time. All right, break up long text, number 4. Okay, this is also a really big one. This has had really dramatic results for me. I want you to think about when you go to websites or when you get emails that are just like massive paragraphs. You just see a block of a paragraph and then like a space and then another big block of paragraph. When you go to a blog and you see a blog and it's written that way, it's kind of exhausting, right? Do you find that you scroll with your mouse? You don't even read the whole thing. You scan it, right? We scan websites. We scan emails now for the headings to see, is this worth my time? Is this worth me reading this whole email through? And so if we space our email copy apart, if we write 1-sentence emails, there's like white space, and it's relaxing to the eye. And what it does is it causes the eye to be drawn down, and it keeps us reading, especially if we do some other things that I'm going to talk about in a minute here, where we bold certain things or we create headings that are a little bit bigger. Those continue to draw the eye down, and that's what we want to do. We want to move the eye down the email so it continues to read. We don't want to do something where it causes the person to think, oh my gosh, that's so much information, overload, and brain shuts down. I have to burn too many calories. I'm not going to read this. Okay, so this is why the 2-sentence paragraph rule for me exists. I almost never write a paragraph in an email anymore that's more than 2 sentences. And if you want to go back and look at all of my emails I've sent you in the last 2, 3, 4 months, try to find a paragraph where I haven't broken that rule. I really watch that. So it's usually 1 sentence at a time, and it draws your eye down, okay? So remove those long, stuffy sentences, hit the carriage return often, use white space, lots of white space. Okay, tip number 5, spend time on your headline, okay? So many of us spend a lot of time writing our copy of the body of our email, and we need to spend more time on the headline. Here's why. The headline's job, the only job of the headline, is to get the person to open it. It is not the job of the headline to sell what is inside the email. It is not the job of the headline to do what the body of the email is supposed to do, okay, which is the call to action piece. All it's designed to do is get you to open the stinking thing, right? Because open rates are so low. So we need to think about, what can I write in that subject line so that it'll cause them to open it? And don't try to fit the entire kitchen sink into that email subject line. So I usually write like 5 different headlines down just as a discipline, and then I pick my favorite one, because here's the thing, usually your first headline is not your best one. It just isn't. So write down at least 5. Now there are some copywriter trainers who will say that you should do 50 headlines. I do not have time for that, okay? But if you're a hardcore copywriter and you're getting paid to do that job, then that's what they do. They sit and brainstorm 50 different headlines, and then they usually find 1 or 2 that they like. So the job of the headline is to get you to open the email. The job of the copy inside, the body of the email, is to get you to click the link, the call to action that's in there. And it's the job of the landing page, wherever that click takes you, the copy on that page, to actually do the sale job. All right, so don't confuse the different purposes of the different parts of your emails. Okay, number 6, read your copy out loud when you're done. I always do this, and I always end up changing my copy. So I know in ConvertKit, there's a button at the last step of the broadcast is to see the preview. And so I look at it, I just take a look at it and I read it out loud. And if it sounds funny, like if there's a phrase that I'm like, bleh, that's not how I would talk, or that sounds strange coming right there, then it has to go. I edit it, I take it out, I change it. Or if I find my eyes as they're moving across the page, if it just like, if I feel like I went over a speed bump, like, I'm missing something there, or that was really blunt, or that transition was lacking, I'll feel it when I'm speaking, because again, since we want to write conversationally, if it doesn't feel like something that you would say out loud, or if it doesn't flow like a conversation might, then you need to adjust it. So this is a really good tip. A lot of times you'll also find mistakes in your grammar. See, I'm not totally anti-grammar. You'll find mistakes in grammar or in spelling when you do that as well. Okay, number 7. If it's too hard to read, this is kind of with number 6. If it's too hard to read for any reason at all, fix it or delete it. So if you are going through this email after you've written it and it's not making sense, or you're not quite sure, like it's too wordy and you don't really need to say all that, just delete it. People don't like, if you can make it shorter, make it shorter. If you don't have to say something 3 different times in a paragraph, then just say it once. Delete it or fix it. Number 8, length. Okay, how long does my email have to be? So there is, I almost didn't use this quote because I feel like it's a little bit sketchy, but here I'm going to say it anyway. I read this in a book. Copy is like a woman's skirt. It should be long enough to cover the essentials, but short enough to keep it interesting. Did I just say that? I did, but I like it. I think it's funny, tongue-in-cheek, but it really says a lot there. It needs to be long enough to say what it needs to say, but short enough to get to the point, all right? We don't want to waste people's time with long, drawn-out emails, but at the same time, if your email needs to be long to make the point, then it needs to be long, and people will read long emails if they're interested in your product. Now, I find that my longest emails tend to be when I have a long sales sequence, okay? When I'm selling a high-ticket priced item and I really need to kind of convince someone, then those emails tend to be longer. For things that are just informational and value-driven, those don't usually go very long. So I don't know if that helps you, but there isn't a general rule of thumb on this one. It's just, it needs to be as long as it needs to be. All right, number 9, use formatting. Oh, this is so huge. Use formatting to draw the eye down the page, okay? To break up the text too. So we just talked earlier about how you want to have like 1-sentence paragraphs. And this is kind of going along with that. The eye naturally is going to skim and scan the email before they actually read the whole thing. They're going to decide within about 5 seconds, if they actually open your email, they're going to decide whether this email deserves their attention to read the whole thing. So if you can place certain headings or formatting within the email that's going to help this decision-making process happen for the eye of your reader, then that's a bonus. So think about not just breaking up the text with lines, but like, can you bold certain key phrases? Or when you get to a certain section that you want to really emphasize, or if there's a quote you really want them to take home, like should that be bold? Or if there's the key call to action that you want them to remember, if this is an informational email, should that be bold? So using bold and italics, changing the color of the font. I do that almost always in my sales emails. My call to action is usually always in a different color. Punctuation. So I think it's called the ellipsis, or the ellipsis. I think it's called the ellipsis. So it's this ... I use ... a ton at the end of my sentences because it's like a hook, and it draws people down to the next line to want to keep reading. I also use colons a lot at the end of my sentences. Again, bad grammar. I don't end with a period, but the colon causes someone to want to see, oh, well, what's the list she's about to make? And that'll keep them reading. Bullet points are another great way because it's just interesting. The eye is drawn to that. It just breaks up the text and makes it easy to quickly scan and get some information. Capitalization. So, don't ever write like an email that's all caps so that someone feels like you're shouting at them the whole time. But you can use caps effectively for phrases or for a one word to just kind of show that you're emphasizing it or that you're putting some special emotion behind that word. Because again, you're wanting it to sound like a conversation. So whatever you can do with the formatting to help you with to show those like intonation moments and those emphasis moments, the better. Changing the size of the fonts is another one, and just headings. I know that some of you write like newsletters. That's kind of an obvious one where you would use headings to kind of show these different sections. But even when you're just writing a basic, like friendly relational email, headings can be helpful because it's just a different size, it's a different style, and it draws the eye down. All right? That is a really, really big one. So play around with formatting. Number 10, watch the mood that you're in when you write. I have found that there are certain times when I seem to write better emails. Like if I look back at the emails that end up doing really well, a lot of them are written when I'm feeling passionate about something. Like I'm coming off of an experience where I had a really great high or a big win, or I learned something and I couldn't wait to share it. So an example, sometimes I write a little sassy, a little tongue-in-cheek. Sometimes I'm just really passionate about something. So I learned a few weeks ago, I made my own chili powder for the first time. I know some of you are like, what? I've been doing that forever. You don't know how to do that? No, I've never done it before. So I dried my own hot chili peppers, and then I mashed them up and turned them into chili flakes. And I was like, this is awesome. Okay. And so I made a video about it. And then I used my Pentagon formula, which is how I kind of create my content every week. But then I wrote my email about the video that I had just made and pointed to it. But I talked about how I'd learned this skill and how awesome it was and what you could do. And I wrote that email when I was in a mood, right? When I was super excited about it. I just thought it was cool. And the way I wrote, you could tell that I was just like, I was flinging, I was sassy. I was like, dang, this is awesome. And here's what I did. You're not going to believe this. So just pay attention to the mood that you're writing in. If you are in a bad mood, a down and out mood, your emails will show it. It's going to be hard to write passionately. If you are rushed and you're not giving it your full attention, it's going to be hard for you to write. So try to take advantage of those moments when the energy is already there, and just sit down and you'll find that it flows a lot faster. Okay, tip number 12, keep the focus on the hero, not on you when you write. This is a really big one. If you've watched any of my other training videos that are all about the story brand framework, this is a revolutionary concept that when you write copy, you need to remember that the customer is the hero in the story and you are not. So a lot of brands make that mistake. They turn themselves into the hero. They talk about themselves a lot. And it's okay to talk about yourself as long as you're always doing so with the purpose of pointing to your customer and talking about their problem and their pain and how you're going to help them. So the story brand framework is a marketing framework that uses story and the elements of storytelling that have been around for generations and generations, and uses those to help draw the reader in, draw the customer in, and get them to, I guess, become loyal to you and ultimately buy from you. So in the story brand framework, you learn the 7 elements of great stories, of great screenwriters. These are the tools the screenwriters use to write amazing stories, and then you use them to put them in your marketing. And the core concept here is that the customer is the hero and you are not. So when you're writing an email, write it to the customer with the customer in mind, with the hero in mind. Don't make yourself the hero. So always be thinking about, what can I do? How is this adding value to my hero? How is this moving them forward on their quest, on their journey to get where they want to go? You, in the story, are the guide. You play the part of the guide, not the hero. And so the guide's job is to show empathy and to show authority and to give the plan to the hero, to show them, here's what you need to do. Here's your call to action. So that's a really key kind of mindset shift that you have to have when you're sitting down to write. It's really tempting to be like, oh, I'm going to talk about what I did today. That's okay as long as you twist the story and use it as a metaphor, find a way to teach them so that they can then learn from it as well, okay? So keep the focus on the hero, not on you. Here's the reality, like, they don't care about you. I know that sounds really harsh. I don't mean it that way. Of course, they love farmers. That's why they're buying from you. But ultimately, like, customers care about themselves. They're coming to you because they're trying to solve their problems, and they don't want another hero in their story. They're the hero, so they don't want to compete with someone else. So let them be the hero, you be the guide. and just understand that they are looking for ways to help them. Number 13, write consistently. When you're writing emails, you need to be consistent in the frequency at which you are writing. Now, this is a big one. I know a lot of you are like, oh, I'm feeling guilty now. I haven't written an email to my list in like 3 months. It's okay. It's okay. I was there once too. I want you to just commit to changing that right now. This is really huge. And let me tell you why. There's a couple of reasons. Writing on a frequent basis. Now, let me just answer this question first. How often should you write? Okay, you should not just write because Corinna says you should write. Okay, you should write when you have something to say. Okay, don't just write fluff because then people will learn eventually, like, I don't need to open this. There's nothing valuable in here. Don't waste their time, right? But this matters partly for your sender reputation. So you know how we've talked about how some emails end up in the promotions tab a lot? One of the factors that determines whether or not the internet gods send your email to the promotions tab is how often, the frequency at which you send emails. So if you don't send emails on a regular basis, you actually look like a spammer, because that's what spammers do. So having something that you regularly send, somehow, I don't know how, but the internet people in the world out there see that and they can tell, oh, this particular email sender is always sending every week, and that raises your score for your email reputation. All right. Another thing that gets it in your inbox is your open rate. So if your emails tend to get opened by a lot of people they're sent to, then that tells the internet gods that that your stuff is good and it's probably valuable and we should put it in the right inbox. So writing frequently or consistently, I should say, helps your sender reputation. Are your customers going to open absolutely every single email you send, even if they're amazing? No, they're not. All right. So get that off the table right now. That's not the goal. Your goal is not 100% open rate. Totally ridiculous. Okay. But there's value to you showing up in their inbox on a regular basis because it shows you as an authority, keeps you on their radar, so that when they actually do need information from you, let's say that you're coming into their inbox as a lead, like they're not a customer yet. But when they are ready to be a customer, when they're finally ready to buy and they want to go and get vegetables, who are they going to go to? They're going to remember the person that keeps showing up in their inbox and they're going to go there first. Okay, so it's sort of this, hi, it's like a friendly wave every week. Hi, I'm here. We don't have to have a deep, meaningful chat, right? We can just do a wave across the room and you can just see my email and that's okay. All right. So frequency, how often should you write? Okay, so I would answer this differently depending on the time of season it is. So when I'm in the middle of the season, hot and heavy with CSA, I definitely write every week. If I'm in the off season, which I have just now entered, my new rhythm and rule of thumb is every 2 weeks. And part of that is because I feel like I need a break, but I feel like my audience might also need a break, and there isn't as much going on. I'd have to create content on a more consistent basis in my off season in order to have something to teach them and to add value to them. So I just take a quick breather and take a pause, and I'm doing it every 2 weeks. I don't know if I will go more than that. 3 weeks, maybe. For some of you out there, you might be able to get away with that, but I feel like 2 weeks is probably okay. Week is even better. I wouldn't do more than that for our industry. I wouldn't do more than that unless you're in the middle of a launch. So if you're doing an email sales sequence and you're selling for 2 weeks straight, then you absolutely can send an email every day. People are willing to accept that kind of barrage into their inbox if they know it's for a limited time. All right. Okay. Tip number 14. All right. One idea. Your email should have one idea. Oh, this is so hard. This is so hard. And I feel like the time that I break this rule is when I send my weekly newsletter out to my CSA members. And I always feel like, I feel actually the ickiest about my weekly newsletters to my CSA. And it's because I'm breaking this rule. I worry that my newsletters have too much information in them. It's like, if you confuse, you lose. Like, one of the big rules of copywriting in general and marketing messaging is that you keep things simple, caveman simple. If there's too much information, you overload the brain and you burn too many calories and people just shut down and say, I'm not going to read any of this. And I don't know about you, but whenever I see newsletters come in, like if the subject line says, like I get it from my church every week and it's like grace notes from, newsletter, I hardly ever open it. And it's for that reason, because I just know when I open it, there's going to be a whole lot of information. Some of it's probably the same from the week before, and it's just not going to be new. And so I've just trained my brain not to open it anymore. And when I write my newsletters every week, I have that same fear. It's like there's so much information. I've got this section about this. I've got this section where I review what I talked about last week. How much of this is really new, right? And are people actually going to open this? So I do break that rule with the weekly newsletter, but I do think it has an impact. I think my open rates are lower for that particular document sometimes because there's too much information. In general, when you write like your weekly email to people, just relational building, like it should be one idea, not all kinds of information that you're trying to dump down their throat. Not, oh, don't forget this, and we're also doing this later on this week. Don't forget. There should be one call to action, one story, one metaphor, one kind of general road that you're taking them down that takes them to that call to action. And that's going to keep things really simple. So at the end of the email, they're very clear what that was about and what you want them to do. If you have all kinds of other ideas spinning in this email, you create confusion and they're less likely to take the action that you want them to take. Okay, tip number 15, always use a PS. The PS is a very, very powerful part of the email copy. A lot of people just miss it, don't even think to include it. So you usually have, your greeting, your body, your call to action. Usually I have another call to action at the top, the same one, I do it twice. And then there's the PS. And the PS is often like if you start paying attention to your behaviors when you scan through emails, if you see a PS, you almost always read it, don't you? So do your listeners and your viewers, okay, and your readers. They're scanning the email, like I said before they decide to actually read it. They're scanning it to decide, is this worth my time? And they definitely head to the bottom, and they almost always will read the PS. So the PS is a great place to put kind of the most important thing that you want them to remember. So I repeat a lot of things. Sometimes the PS is often a repetition of something I said before, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, not everyone's going to read this email. They're going to scan it. So if they are going to scan it, what's the one thing I want them to know? I'm going to put it in the PS. And a lot of times the PS has the call to action in it as well, okay? So that's a great place to either summarize the most important thing from your email and call them to action again, or the other way I tend to use the PS is I'll use it as a hook. So great storytelling, when you read a great book and you get to the end of the chapter and they drop this bomb on you at the end of the chapter that makes you want to read and move on to the next chapter, okay, that's the hook. So if you can create some kind of a sentence, like in my next email, I'm going to share one of the best giveaways that my CSA members have loved. Don't miss it, ... So it's sort of like, there's a teaser of what's coming next. The ... is used a lot when I use that particular strategy. So it can either be a summary of what you've just talked about, the one most important thing, using one sentence, maybe two. A lot of times I bold the PS. Or it can be that teaser concept that I just said. Okay, I'm almost done. Tip number 16, tell stories in your emails. This is a great one. When all else fails and you're staring at an empty screen and you're not sure what to talk about, think about something that happened in the past week that you could tell a story about. We've already mentioned the StoryBrand framework, but stories are this great framework that we have used for generations. It draws the brain in, and what it does is it causes us not to be distracted anymore. Like when you hear a story being told, or you walk in and sit down and watch a movie, your mind is focused on that story. You are actually not distracted and daydreaming. So the minute you start telling a story, the mind is drawn in and wants to keep reading. So I used to be a youth pastor a long time ago, so I had to do a lot of sermons and messages to my students, and so I've gained the power of the illustration. So coming up with an illustration that you can tell that teaches a little nugget of truth. That's a skill that probably comes easy to me because I've had a lot of practice. So find something that went on in your day and then find some kind of truth in it and let that be what you're trying to teach. And people will remember it because you told a story around it. You put some context to it and then throw your call to action in there. Okay, tip number 17 is survey your audience. So when you're writing emails, you will write better emails if you have surveyed your audience. Why is this important? The surveys that come back, if you write a good survey, you will really get some amazing responses from your members, from your actual customers, and you'll be able to take those words and use them in your copy itself. Especially when you're writing sales emails, like sales email sequences, you want to pay attention to what are the things that my customers have actually said in my telephone interviews, in my survey responses, and pull those out and use those stories, use those snippets in your email copy. That is actually one of the first things that you learn in a copywriting course, how to do research on your customer so that you can find those phrases and then you can use them in your copy. People will read things if it feels like it's like you're in their head, if you know them better than they know themselves. And the only way you can do that is by doing these kinds of surveys. So you can find out what they want to learn, and then you can teach that stuff to them. You're just going to get the copy literally right out of their mouths. So I have a whole video all about this that I really, really love. I'll link that in the show notes. It's how to do a great survey. And so I want to encourage you to watch how to write surveys that will actually give you good copy. Okay, tip number 18 is create a swipe file of great copywriting examples. So put a Google Drive together, and in that Google Drive, whenever you see a great email come through your inbox and you're like, wow, I actually enjoyed reading that, put it in there and just file it away. So I have a file like that going because I do subscribe to a lot of email lists who are copywriters, and I like to study how they put those together. And sometimes I even will take some of those templates and then put them, when I'm writing sales copy especially, put them into my little template in ConvertKit, and I'll kind of start with that and be like, okay, well, this is not my industry, but I can change the words to fit my industry and use it sort of as a template. So if you like some of the stuff that I write, might be I know that not all of my stuff is amazing, but there are some good emails. You start with that and just put those away somewhere. I know that if you are a subscriber to my email list, you get I think it's like 6 emails in a row when you subscribe to my email list where I give you free stuff. And that is a template. Those 6 emails in that drip campaign is a sales sequence, actually an indoctrination sequence is what that is, different style of email. And you could swipe that whole thing, put it away, and then use it as a format. Like, well, what is she doing in that first email? What's the second one? Oh, she's giving the best of her best. Okay, well, that's something I could do in my indoctrination email. So, take examples that you're seeing out there. If you want to get on my email list, you can go to sharedlegacyfarms.com/email download. And you will not only get the email swipe file that I used for my early birds sales sequence 2 years ago, but you'll also get subscribed to the email list. And then you can start seeing some examples of that. All right, 2 more and then I'm done. Number 19, ask yourself, after you've written your email, ask yourself this: would I open this email? Would I open this email? If you wouldn't, then you're wasting their time. Okay, so this is always just, sometimes we feel like we have to write because Corinna said you have to write or someone said you have to write every week. Listen, if you're not adding value, if you're not entertaining, if you're not inspiring them in some way, then don't write, okay? Just wait till the next week till you have something to say. But ask yourself, would I open this email? Is there something in here that's going to be edifying, that's going to add value to them, that's going to give them information they actually need? Then keep it in the pipeline and send it. But if it's not, then you need to either edit it or you need to delete it. And then finally, number 20, a tip for writing better copy is to use a framework. There are a lot of frameworks out there. So the StoryBrand framework is one that I will have started teaching. I will continue to teach you. Last week, I taught you the Pastor framework. There's AIDA, which is one that I'll be teaching you soon, AIDA. There's the 3 V's. There's lots of different formulas out there for great copywriting. And so if you can learn some of those formulas, see the frameworks, that really does help you when you're sitting down to write. You don't feel like you're just looking at a blank canvas and you have no idea where to start. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. 20 tips. This book, I want to lift it up again. It's called This Book Will Teach You How to Write Better. It's by Neville Medhora. I think I have this on my website, mydigitalfarmer.com, under the resources page. There's an affiliate link for that. If you click on it through my website, I'll get a very, very small commission for it. But I love this book. I recommend this all the time. Look how short it is. You can read it in 30 minutes. Super easy to read. See, he follows his own advice. Like, look how he like draws the eye down the page. Okay, so super practical. I recommend this. If you liked this video and you found it valuable, I would love it if you would like, comment, or share something down below in the comments, or hit that little like yay button, or hit the subscribe button. And I also want to encourage you, if you're watching this on YouTube, and you haven't discovered the Facebook group where I do these weekly videos live, you can go to mydigitalfarmer.com and hit the button that says join my Facebook group, and you will find this group where you can watch these videos in Facebook every week. So thank you guys so much for joining me. If you have a question, post it down below. I look forward to seeing you next week, where we continue to talk more about how to write copy and get better at using your words to connect with your customer so that you can help them grow. Thanks, guys.